In a small psychiatric office under fluorescent lights that made everything seem sadder than it already was, a 43-year-old woman held a worn photograph against her chest, while three people looked at her with a mixture of pity and exasperation. Celia Moraes, a domestic worker, hands calloused from years of hard work, sunken eyes from 3 years without proper sleep, repeated the same words she had been saying since it all began. "My son is alive. I know Gabriel is alive." The psychiatrist sighed wearily and exchanged glances with her husband, Paulo, and with her eldest daughter, Renata. They all had the same expression: compassion for a woman who had clearly gone mad with grief. "Mrs. Moraes," the doctor said with the forced patience of someone who had repeated that conversation dozens of times, "your son died 3 years ago in a shipwreck in Indonesia. His body was never recovered because the sea was too rough. I know it's difficult to accept without a body to bury, but you need to make peace with reality." Celia shook her head vigorously. "You don't understand. I dream about him every night. Dreams where he shows me things, places. He's trying to tell me where he is." And then she said something that would make everyone in that room look at her as if she had finally crossed the line of sanity. "I sold my house. I bought a ticket to Indonesia. I'm going to find him." The silence that followed was broken by the psychiatrist writing something on his prescription pad. Paulo took the paper and read, "Recommendation for involuntary psychiatric hospitalization," and Celia's battle to prove she wasn't insane, but rather connected to her son in a way science couldn't explain, was about to become even more impossible. To understand how Celia reached that moment of complete desperation, I need to take you back 3 years and 2 months, to a sunny January day that started ordinary and ended by completely destroying her life. Gabriel Moraes was 21 years old, bright chestnut eyes full of dreams and a smile that lit up any room. He was Celia's youngest, and if there was something she could say with pride despite all the poverty they lived in, it was that she had raised a good son. Gabriel worked as an assistant at an environmental NGO that did marine conservation work. He had always loved the ocean. Since childhood he collected shells, drew fish, dreamed of being a marine biologist even knowing the family couldn't afford college. But he didn't give up and never let go of his dream. He studied alone, took free online courses, volunteered, and then, miraculously, he got a scholarship to participate in a 3-month project in Indonesia studying coral reefs. Celia would never forget the day Gabriel received news of the scholarship. He came running into that humble house in the outskirts, shouting, laughing, picking up his mother, and spinning with her. Mom, I got it. I'm going to Indonesia. 3 months working with real scientists." Celia laughed with him, cried with him, and tried to hide the tightness in her heart. Indonesia was on the other side of the world. She had never been separated from him for more than 2 days, but she said none of that, just smiled and said, "I always knew you were going to do great things, my son. I always knew." Gabriel left 3 weeks later on a 26-hour flight that consumed all the savings the family had gathered for months. But it was worth every penny to see the sparkle in his eyes. And during the first 2 months, Gabriel sent messages regularly. Photos of the impossibly blue ocean, of colorful fish, of him smiling with diving equipment. "Mom, this is paradise. I've never been so happy." And then, on March 23rd, the messages stopped. Celia didn't worry the first day. Gabriel had said they were going to more remote areas where internet was scarce. But on the 3rd day without news, she began to feel something strange, an uneasiness she couldn't name. She called the NGO in Brazil, which contacted the team in Indonesia, and that's how she received the call that would destroy her world. "Mrs. Moraes, I'm sorry to have to say this over the phone." The NGO coordinator's voice trembled. "There was an accident. The boat carrying Gabriel and 4 other researchers to a remote island capsized during a sudden storm. They managed to rescue 2 researchers alive. The other 3, including Gabriel, are still missing. Searches continue, but after 3 days at sea, the chances..." He didn't finish. He didn't need to. Celia collapsed. She literally fell to the kitchen floor where she was when she answered the phone, and let out a sound she didn't know she was capable of making. A primitive scream of pain that brought Paulo running from the yard, and Renata from the house next door. "No, no, no," was all she could repeat while rocking on the floor. Not my son, not my Gabriel. The days that followed were a blur of incomprehensible pain. Searches continued for 2 weeks, but they found nothing. No body, No significant wreckage apart from parts of the vessel. The ocean had simply swallowed 3 people, including her boy. The NGO was kind, paid to bring Paulo and Renata to Indonesia for the official presumed death declaration procedures. But Celia didn't go. Not because she didn't have money, which the NGO would cover, but because something inside her, something she couldn't explain, said that going there would be accepting he was dead. And she couldn't accept. "I would feel it," she told Paulo when he returned. "If my son were dead, I would feel it. My heart would know, and I don't feel that. I feel him alive, Paulo. I know it sounds crazy, but I feel it." Paulo, destroyed with his own grief, just hugged her. "It's denial, love, it's normal, but the ocean was violent. No one would survive 3 days. 2 survived," Celia interrupted. 2 were rescued alive. Why couldn't Gabriel be the 3rd? But weeks turned into months, and officially Gabriel was declared dead. They held a funeral without a body, just a photo of him smiling. Celia stood the entire time, eyes dry, because crying at a funeral would be admitting there was a dead person there. And she refused. Friends and family began to whisper with concern. "She's in deep denial. It's not healthy. She needs help." And then, 6 months after the shipwreck, the dreams began. Celia woke from a restless night's sleep with images so vivid they seemed like memories. She dreamed of Gabriel on a beach she had never seen, but so real she could feel the sand. He was alive, but confused, as if he didn't know where he was. And there were people around him, people in simple clothes speaking a language she didn't understand. Gabriel looked directly at her in the dream and said, "Mom, find me." Celia woke with her heart racing. It was just a dream, she told herself, just her brain processing the trauma. But the next night she dreamed again, and again the next. Always with different scenes, but always with Gabriel. Gabriel sitting in a simple hut. Gabriel helping people fish. Gabriel with a distant expression, as if he had forgotten something important but couldn't remember what. After 2 weeks of dreams every night, Celia began to write them down. She took an old notebook and noted every detail, the type of trees she saw, people's clothes, the sounds, and she began to notice patterns. The people in the dreams wore Indonesian-style clothing. There were always mountains in the background of a specific type, and in one dream, she saw a sign with writing she couldn't read completely, but copied the symbols as best she could. Celia took her notes to an Indonesian restaurant in the city, where she knew the owner. "Mr. Budi, can you look at this? Can you understand anything?" The man, initially smiling, became serious when looking at her scribbles. "Ma'am, where did you see this?" "In my dreams," Celia admitted, knowing how it sounded. "They're about my son." Budi knew about Gabriel. He knew the family. He looked at Celia with clear pity. "Mrs. Celia, this that you drew here, if it's correct, appears to be Bahasa from Sulawesi, a specific region of Indonesia. But..." He hesitated. "But what?" Celia pressed. "But this word you wrote, Togian, is a very remote archipelago. Hundreds of small islands, many without regular contact with the outside world. Traditional communities. If you're having dreams about your son there..." He stopped, clearly not wanting to feed what he thought was delusion. But Celia grabbed that information like a drowning person grabs a piece of floating wood. Togian Islands. That's where I need to go." When Celia told the family about her discovery, the reaction was exactly what she expected. Paulo held her by the shoulders, eyes full of concern. "Love, listen to what you're saying. You're talking about searching for our son on hundreds of remote islands based on dreams. Do you understand how that sounds?" "It sounds like madness," Celia admitted. "But Paulo, every night he shows me more. Yesterday I dreamed of him carrying blue fishing nets. Today I researched, and those islands are known for traditional fishing with specific blue nets. How would I know that? Internet. Movies. Your mind picking up information you saw and don't consciously remember." Renata intervened, herself a psychology student. "Mom, I recognize all the signs. You're suffering from complicated grief. Your brain is creating elaborate fantasies to avoid accepting Gabriel's death. Please let me help you. We can find a good therapist, work through this." But Celia didn't want therapy. She wanted answers. She began working double shifts, triple when she could. She cleaned houses during the day, did night cleanings in offices, accepted any extra work. Paolo and Renata thought working excessively was her way of dealing with the pain. They didn't know she was saving every penny for a plane ticket. The dreams continued, increasingly specific. Celia dreamed of Gabriel helping an elderly lady with white hair, tied in a traditional bun. She dreamed of him repairing a net with a specific knot. She dreamed of him looking at the sea with a lost expression, as if waiting for something that wasn't coming. And always, always he said, "Mom, find me. I don't remember, but you know, find me." 18 months after the shipwreck, Celia had enough money. One-way ticket to Indonesia, not returned because she would use everything she had. When she told the family, the reaction was total horror. "You're going to throw away all our savings to chase a delusion?" Paolo shouted for the first time in 25 years of marriage, raising his voice to her. "Gabriel is gone, Celia. Our son is gone. And you need to accept that before you lose your sanity completely." "If he were dead, I would know," Celia shouted back. "I carried that boy for 9 months inside me. I fed him from my body. I know every beat of his heart because it beat inside me. And that heart is still beating, Paolo." "I know it is." "This is madness," Paolo said, lower now, defeated. "What if you go there and find nothing? If you spend everything, go to the other side of the world, and have to finally accept he's gone?" "Then I'll accept it," Celia said. "But I need to try, because if there's a chance, a 1 in a million possibility that my son is alive and waiting for someone to find him, I can't give up on him. Would you give up?" The question hung in the air, and Paolo, with eyes full of tears, shook his head. "No. But Celia, what if you don't come back? What if I lose you too? You won't lose me. I'm going to bring our son back, or I'm finally going to make peace, accept, and return. But I need to go." That's when the family truly intervened. Renata, desperate to save her mother from what she saw as complete mental collapse, scheduled an appointment with a psychiatrist. And that doctor, hearing Celia talk about the dreams, about the certainty that Gabriel was alive on some remote island, about plans to travel alone to search for him, became seriously concerned. "Mrs. Moraes, I understand your suffering, but what you're describing to me are clear symptoms of grief-induced delusional disorder. If you proceed with this plan, you'll be putting yourself in danger." "It's not delusion," Celia insisted. "It's mother's intuition. It's a connection that goes beyond what medicine can explain." The psychiatrist looked at Paolo and Renata. "With the family's consent, I can recommend temporary hospitalization for stabilization, 3 weeks in a controlled environment, appropriate medication, intensive therapy. We can help her process this trauma properly." And that's how Celia found herself looking at a recommendation for involuntary psychiatric commitment. "You can't do this to me," she said, panic rising. "I'm not crazy. I just know my son is alive." "Mom, that's exactly what a person with delusion would say," Renata responded gently. "Don't you see how you've lost perspective? Please accept our help. Do this for me, for Dad, for yourself." But Celia saw the determination in their eyes and understood. If she stayed, they would commit her. They would take away her freedom, drug her until she agreed Gabriel was dead, until her dreams stopped with some heavy medication. That night, Celia did something she never imagined doing. She waited for Paolo and Renata to fall asleep, took the small suitcase she had prepared in hiding, the envelope with money she had hidden in a place no one knew, and left the house. She left only a letter. "Forgive me. I love you. But I need to do this. If I'm wrong, I'll return and accept any help you want to give. But if I'm right, I'll bring our Gabriel back. Don't look for me. When I have news, I'll call. With love, Celia." When Paolo woke up and found the letter, the desperation was absolute. He called the police, but Celia was an adult. Left of her own free will, there was no crime. He called the airport, but she had already boarded a flight to Jakarta. And all Paolo and Renata could do was wait and pray that the woman they loved wouldn't completely lose herself on the other side of the world, chasing ghosts. Celia arrived in Indonesia 28 hours later, exhausted, scared, but determined. She didn't speak the language, had never been outside Brazil, had extremely limited resources. But she had something more powerful. A mother's absolute certainty. Using the little English she knew and lots of mime, she managed to get to Sulawesi. And from there she began asking about the Togian Islands. How do I get there? I need to look for someone there. It took 3 days of travel on packed buses, on small unstable boats, on rides with fishermen, who looked with curiosity at that Brazilian woman alone. But finally, Celia reached the starting point for the Togian archipelago. Hundreds of islands, most tiny, many inhabited by traditional communities with little outside contact. Searching for a person there without resources, without knowing the language, seemed impossible, but Celia had her dreams. She showed Gabriel's photo to everyone she met. She drew the mountains she saw in dreams, the trees, the hut. Most shook their heads, not understanding or not recognizing. But then, in a small village on the 5th island she visited, a child looked at Celia's drawing and said something in Bahasa to his mother. The woman took the drawing, studied it, and then looked at Celia with a strange expression. Through a local young man who spoke basic English, the woman said, "This drawing looks like Pulau Kadidiri, but the remote side. Not many visitors, small community, just fishermen." Celia's heart raced. "This man," she showed Gabriel's photo. "Have you seen him?" The woman looked, thought, shook her head. But there was some hesitation. "Maybe. There's a story. 6 moons ago." The translator struggled with the concept. "Sorry, many months ago, fishermen found a man in the water. Almost dead. Didn't speak, didn't remember his name. The community took care of him." Celia could barely breathe. "Is that man still there? What does he look like?" But the woman didn't know more. She had only heard the story. "You want to go to Pulau Kadidiri? It's far. Need special boat. Dangerous if weather is bad." "I'll go," Celia said without hesitation. "How do I get there?" It took 2 more days and the rest of Celia's money to convince a fisherman to take her. And during the entire 6-hour journey in a small boat over waters that went from calm blue to rough green, Celia prayed. She prayed like she hadn't prayed since she was a child. "God, if he's there, let me find him. Please. Let my dreams be real." Pulau Kadidiri was exactly like her dreams. The mountains in the background, the white sand beach, the curved coconut trees. Celia stepped on the sand and felt as if she had been there 1,000 times before. The fishermen took her to the community on the remote side of the island, fewer than 20 families living traditionally. And when they arrived, people looked with curiosity at the stranger. An older man who seemed to be the leader came to speak. Through gestures and the few English words he knew, Celia managed to communicate. "I'm looking for my son. He was at sea, lost many months ago." She showed Gabriel's photo. The man took the photo, looked at it for a long time, and then looked at Celia with an expression she couldn't read. He said something to other people who gathered, a heated discussion in a language she didn't understand. Finally, a young woman who spoke better English approached. "Ma'am, the man says there is a person here. Came from the sea long time ago. Doesn't remember anything. Doesn't speak much. Helps the fishermen, but is like..." "A ghost?" "No, sorry, like a person without past." "Where is he?" Celia asked, her whole body trembling. "Can I see him?" The young woman translated to the leader, who hesitated, then nodded. He signaled for Celia to follow. They walked through the simple village, houses of wood and straw, nets drying in the sun. And then the leader pointed to a figure crouched on the beach repairing a fishing net, a blue net, exactly like in her dream. The figure was facing away, hair longer than Gabriel used to wear, sunburned skin, thinner body. But there was something about the way he moved. Celia felt her knees go weak. "Gabriel," she called, voice caught in her throat. The figure stopped working, remained still, but didn't turn around. Then Celia walked closer, heart beating so hard she thought it would explode. "Gabriel, my son, is it you?" She got close enough to see his profile. And even with long hair, even 20 pounds thinner, even with a beard he never had, she would know that face anywhere. It was her son, her boy, alive. Celia let out a sound between laughter and sob and ran, falling to her knees beside him. "Gabriel! My God, Gabriel, you're alive! You're alive!" She tried to hug him, but he pulled away, confused, almost afraid. And when he looked at her, Celia saw that his eyes, those brown eyes she knew so well, were empty of recognition. "Saya tidak mengerti," he said in Bahasa. "I don't understand." The young translator had followed and explained gently, "Ma'am, he doesn't speak Portuguese. Since he arrived, only learned Bahasa. And he doesn't remember. Doesn't remember anything before the ocean." Celia felt like she'd been punched. She found her son, he was alive. But he didn't know her. Didn't remember being her Gabriel, having a mother, anything of his entire life. "Gabriel," she tried again. "It's me. Your mother. Mom. You know me. Deep down you know." But Gabriel only looked at her as he would look at any stranger. The translator explained that when the fishermen found him, he was clinging to wreckage, more dead than alive. He was in a coma for 3 days. When he woke up, he didn't know his name, didn't recognize anything. The nearest doctors, 2 days by boat, said it was amnesia from trauma and near drowning, and that it could be permanent. The community adopted him, gave him the name Alam, which means nature. He worked, ate, existed, but like a ghost, as if a part of him was trapped somewhere he couldn't reach. "Please," Celia begged the leader, "let me stay. Let me try to help him remember." There was discussion. Finally, they agreed. She could stay with a family that had an empty room, but couldn't force Alam to do anything. The days that followed were the hardest of Celia's life. Being near her son, but him not recognizing her. She spoke in Portuguese, told stories of his childhood, showed photos on her phone, which was almost out of battery, nowhere to charge. Gabriel. Alam listened politely, but without connection. It was like presenting a stranger's life story. But Celia didn't give up. She accompanied him fishing, helped repair nets, learned some words in Bahasa, and slowly, gently, told him about his life. When you were 5 years old, you found an injured bird. You took care of it for weeks. You called it Blue. No reaction. You dreamed of studying the ocean. You said it had more mysteries than space. Nothing. A week passed like this. Celia felt desperation growing. What if he never remembered? What if she had traveled all the way there to find her son's living body? But if his soul was lost forever? That night, alone in the borrowed room, she finally broke down. She cried all the tears she had been holding back. And then she did something she hadn't done in a long time. She prayed. Not asking, but thanking. "Thank you that he's alive. Even if he doesn't remember anything, thank you. Now please, help him come back." The next day, Celia woke with new determination. She asked the translator to take a message to Gabriel. She wanted to take him to the shipwreck site. Doctors said that sometimes returning to the trauma site can awaken memories. It took 2 days to organize a boat and convince Gabriel. But he agreed, more out of politeness than interest. They sailed to the approximate coordinates where the vessel sank. And when they arrived, Celia asked to stop. She looked at Gabriel, and through the translator said, "You were here, in this ocean, coming back to study the corals you loved so much. There was a storm. She took his hand, the first time he let her. You fought to survive because you're a fighter. Like you always were." And then Celia did something impulsive. She began to sing, a lullaby she sang to Gabriel when he was a baby, when he was a child and scared, when he was a stressed teenager. "Sleep, sleep, my little angel. Mommy's here." Her voice faltering but continuing. "Sleep, sleep without fear. I'll protect you, my love." Gabriel became very still. His hands began to tremble. And then, for the first time since Celia found him, he spoke in Portuguese. It was just one word, whispered, as if coming from very far away. "Mom?" Celia stopped singing. She barely dared to breathe. Yes, my son, it's Mommy." Gabriel looked at her, and this time there was something different in his eyes. Recognition, confusion. Tears began to fall without him understanding why. I know that song." His voice was strange, as if he were learning to use Portuguese again. "I don't know from where, but I know it. Because I sang it to you since you were born," Celia said, tears flowing freely now. "Every night. You asked for it even when you got older and said it was kid stuff. You asked for it because it made you feel safe." Something collapsed inside Gabriel. Fragmented images began to appear in flashes in his mind. A small house, a woman singing, smell of food, feeling of being loved. I can't see clearly, but I feel. He looked at Celia's hands, calloused from work. Your hands. Why do your hands make me remember safety? Because these hands held you when you were born, fed you, took care of every fever, every injury, dried every tear. The days that followed were of slow and painful memory recovery. It didn't all come back at once. They came in pieces. A childhood memory here, an adolescent feeling there. Celia sang, told stories, held his hands. And gradually Gabriel began to remember. He remembered his father, his sister, the house, the NGO, the shipwreck. I remember the water, he said one night, trembling. I remember not being able to breathe, sinking, thinking I was going to die. And I remember thinking my mom will be alone. And then, nothing. I wake up here not knowing who I was. But I found you, Celia said. Because mothers always find their children, always. After 3 weeks on the island, Gabriel had recovered maybe 70% of his memories, enough to know who he was, who his family was. It was time to return. The community that took him in held a farewell ceremony, thanking Alum for his time with them, wishing Gabriel a good life. And on a boat, then on a plane, then another plane, Celia took her son back home. When Paulo received Celia's call from Jakarta Airport saying, "I'm bringing our son home," he thought she had finally completely lost her mind, until she put Gabriel on the phone. And hearing, "Dad, it's me," Paulo fell to his knees crying in a way he hadn't cried since he was a child. Renata, skeptical until the last minute, only believed when she saw Gabriel in person at the airport days later. Celia and Gabriel's story became national news. The mother who went insane insisting her son was alive, who sold everything, traveled alone to the other side of the world following her dreams and found him. Doctors tried to explain. The dreams were probably her mind processing information she had subconsciously absorbed about Indonesia, but they didn't explain how she knew specific details about a remote archipelago she never studied, or how she, coincidentally, chose exactly the region where Gabriel was. Celia didn't care about explanations. She cared that her son was alive, recovering, slowly returning to who he was. And she cared that she learned something she would never forget. Mother's intuition isn't madness. It's a connection that science still doesn't know how to explain. It's love that transcends space, time, and even apparent death. 1 year later, Gabriel was completely recovered. His memories returned completely, the amnesia completely resolved. He returned to work with the NGO, but now with a different focus. He created a project connecting isolated communities with medical resources, because if it weren't for the Pulau Kadidiri community taking me in without questions, I would have died. So, I need to give back. And Celia? She returned to work as she always had, but now there was something different about her. A peace, a certainty. She framed the psychiatric commitment recommendation and hung it on the wall. To remember that the line between madness and faith is sometimes very thin, and that it's worth crossing that line when love asks. Have you ever felt something you couldn't explain rationally? An intuition, a certainty that defies logic? Celia's story shows us that there are things between heaven and earth that science still hasn't reached, that a mother's love creates connections that transcend understanding, and that we must never ever give up on those we love, even when everyone says it's impossible, that it's madness, that we need to accept and move on. If this story touched you, if it made you believe in intuition, in inexplicable connections, in miracles that defy probability, leave a comment. Have you ever had an intuition that everyone called madness but you followed anyway? Share with someone who needs to know that trusting instinct isn't weakness but strength. And subscribe to the Lives with Destiny channel, but only if you believe that mothers know things that science can't explain. Because here we tell stories that remind you, you are more than your rational brain. You have a soul. You have intuition. You have connections that go beyond the visible. And when you trust that, miracles happen.